Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to a special edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. Today I wanted to talk about Modern, and there's a lot happening in the world of Modern right now. First off, the obvious, Modern Masters 2017 will be coming out soon. We saw some announcements yesterday about the packaging and the art on the packaging, which raised some eyebrows as to the potential value or maybe lack of value of the set. I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Also, the thought that WotC is not supporting Modern as much due to less coverage, considering it will no longer be part of the World Magic Cup. And also, we had two major tournaments this weekend, two GPs. So what was going on with the format and how is it impacting the market? What cards are hot and cold right now? So we're going to discuss all of that. Quickly before we get started, though, a reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a link to our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases through any of those links, and I did update it just yesterday, so you'll find Amonkhet products as well as Modern Masters 2017 products you can pre-order now on there. But anything you buy, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. That's always appreciated. Another way to help us out is through Patreon, and you'll also find links to our Patreon page there. I've updated the goals and the rewards, and you'll find the details there as to how to get a hold of a exclusive Angel token from Heroes and Legends. It has this art on the front and our logo, Heroes and Legends, on the back. So check that out. But with that out of the way, let's talk about Modern a little bit. So what is the deal right now with the state of Modern? There's a lot of videos out there on it. I don't want to rehash or retread a lot of stuff that's already been brought up by other YouTubers or by other folks on message boards or what have you. Wedge did a really good analysis on the Mana Source. If you haven't watched that, I would check that out. I would say this about the format. Long story short, without going too far into the weeds, if you're not up to date, a couple things have happened with Modern recently. First off, you're already aware it's been out of the Pro Tour for a while now. It was funny because they took it out of the Pro Tour, they put it back in, then took it back out again. And the reason for that was twofold. They said, one, pros weren't real excited about having it as a format as far as preparation goes. It was just easier for them to work around standard. Secondly, though, and probably most importantly, one of the big key elements is the fact that the Pro Tour is a way to promote the new products and to hopefully sell the new set. And that's kind of the whole idea of the Pro Tour. I always, from a business point of view, found it a little awkward that we would sit there and watch a Modern Pro Tour and they would try to talk about the new cards as much as they could, but it just felt a little flat because all the gameplay we're seeing was older cards. It just didn't really make a whole lot of sense from a business point of view to me, and I probably felt the same way to Wizards. So that I think was a big reason that happened. Now, one of the benefits of removing it from the Pro Tour was the fact that they didn't have to be quite on top of banning cards as frequently for maybe some unorthodox reasons. And what I mean by that is you don't have to worry about how well this is going to look on camera this particular weekend and having to actually do quick bannings to make sure a deck doesn't show up too frequently on camera and stuff like that. So it does help the players in that regard. Now, the big thing that happened recently was Wizards took that another step and they started removing Modern from some other formats. The biggest one being the World Magic Cup, which previous years, we saw last year, they had Team Modern unified, and that will no longer be there. Another thing that changed was the way you get to the World Magic Cup. In the past, they had World Magic Cup qualifiers. Now what they have is what's called Nationals, and Nationals is an old concept, kind of brought back in a new form, but these Nationals competitions, which are pretty major tournaments, will not be Modern tournaments. They will be standard. So it's another place where you won't be playing Modern. And finally, maybe the biggest blow in some ways to folks that play Modern is Grand Prix trials are coming out of the stores and moving just to the Grand Prix, basically like a Friday kickoff. And if you're not familiar with Grand Prix trials, these are just tournaments you can hold, which were really high level tournaments. But the concept was that you can win buys for an upcoming GP. Now, having them coming out of the hands of the stores, I think, is to help prevent a little bit of corruption when it comes to certain LGSs. For example, there were cases where if I'm an LGS owner, maybe I support a certain player for whatever reason. I want them to do well in the GP. I'd like them to win buys. There's ways I can manipulate the format that we choose, for example, that it might benefit that player, manipulate the time that we do the tournament so it could benefit that player. So they did feel like they were a little strange at times, and that there could be some kind of underground stuff going on there. So I like the idea that those have moved on to the Grand Prix, but it does take another high level option of Modern away from the LGSs. So you combine all those things, and the thought process being that WotC has turned its back on Modern and it's going to go away. And I'll be honest with you, I don't quite buy that. And here's my thought on it. Couple things. One of which I saw this weekend, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. The format is thriving right now as far as diversity. The format looks great, and more on that in just a few moments. But secondly, I think it's important to kind of take a moment and sit down and think about one thing. Those of us who watch coverage, whether it's the Pro Tour or World Magic Cup, or if you're watching even this video and me making this video, I mean, we're like the 1%. We're like the hardcore Magic players. If you're watching this video and listening to me talk about Modern for 20 minutes, then you probably are really committed to Magic, as am I, to be sitting here doing it, right? We are the ones that notice that these Pro Tours are all standard when they're on. We are the ones that watch them on Twitch. We are the ones that will watch this sort of coverage. 99% of Magic players, quite honestly, I don't even know if they know what the Pro Tour is or exactly how it works or where you would sit down and watch it. And they are playing Magic, right? They're going to their Friday Night Magics. They're playing at their kitchen table. They're playing Commander. They're playing with their cube, perhaps, or doing some sealed at home with friends. Like, that's the majority of Magic players. Those are the majority of the people that buy WotC's product, quite honestly. And if Modern's available to them, they will play it. They don't need to see other people play it on Twitch to feel like it's viable, quite honestly. Modern is kind of the only show in town right now when it comes to non-rotating formats. You have a few options. I mean, you could try to buy into Legacy or Vintage, but let's be honest, unless you have a lot of money on your hands, that's not happening. And also a lot of friends that have money on their hands, because I was a person that I started to play Magic back in the old days. I had those cards from Vintage and Legacy. I loved playing those formats, but there was no reason for me to keep my cards, quite honestly, because I had nobody to play with after a while. Because my friends that used to play, they moved on, they didn't play anymore, they sold their cards, and the people around me didn't have the means to pick them up. So what do? Well, I could sell my cards, I could buy into Modern or into Standard or Commander or something else. That's what happens, unless you're in very specific regions where you happen to have a strong play group. And they're out there. I mean, usually the bigger cities, especially in the Northwest, the Northeast where Magic started, Seattle, Indianapolis, New York. Yeah, you know what? You probably can play Legacy there just fine most of the time. But most of the country, most of the world, it's really probably not an option for a lot of people. So that brings you forward to maybe Frontier. Well, the problem with Frontier right now, again, it's not adopted in all regions. I mean, there's places in the world that's very popular, like in Japan, obviously, where it started. But it was a reaction to places that couldn't get a hold of older cards easily, so they started this other format. The biggest issue with the format right now is there's nobody governing it. So you don't have a rules committee like you have in Commander. You don't have WotC controlling it like they do Modern and Standard, where if a card becomes disruptive, you can quickly ban it and kind of save the format quickly. There's nobody doing that. And without WotC recognizing it as a format for, say, Magic Online or GPs or just any sanctioned tournament at all, it can't last, I don't think. It needs to have that support. Maybe it will get it. I don't know. But if it doesn't get it, I can't see it competing with Modern, which is a format that does get it. And that's the second thing. Modern still has support. Yes, it's not at World Magic Cup. It's not at the Pro Tour. But it's at GPs, like we saw this weekend, and those GPs are still seeing a lot of people show up. It's at certain local game stores. I mean, it depends on your region and your store and the players, right? It has a Modern Masters release every 2 years at this point. We're getting a new one in just a few weeks. You could argue some of these releases have been better than others. The first one's amazing. The second one, maybe not as exciting. This one is starting off slow, but hopefully recovers. But there is still a push for Modern. It is in WotC's scope right now. They still control the banned list. They're still watching the format. And as a matter of fact, I mean, every set that comes out, you see one or two cards that crosses over into Modern. So even new cards are going into the format. And I think the biggest selling point that I do think that Modern is going to stay alive is what we saw this weekend when it comes to diversity. We had two major tournaments, two Grand Prix. So two different top 8s. Let's look at the decks that were in those two top 8s for a second. All right, so we have Abzan Company, 2 Affinities, Boros Nahiri Control, Death's Shadow, 3 copies of that, 2 copies of Dredge, Golgari Tron, Lantern Control, Living End, Merfolk, Mono White Eldrazi and Taxes, and Naya Burn. So out of 16 decks in the 2 top 8s, you had this much diversity. Yes, 3 Death Shadows, couple Affinities, couple Dredges, everything else was a one of. That's crazy. Like, could you imagine that happening in Standard? Like, that would never happen. I mean, right? If you had 2 big Standard tournaments this weekend, you're going to see Golgari, Copycat, and Mardu Vehicles. Maybe a Selesnya Tokens gets in there. To be fair, I realize there's different variants of some of those decks. There's really 3 different Golgari decks. There's a couple different Copycats out there that are viable. True. But for the most part, overarching archetypes, those are them, right? Now, that's to be expected. I mean, Standard is a much, much smaller card pool than Modern. But this just goes to show you that the health of Modern is actually really strong. The diversity is there. And agree or disagree with some of the bannings Wizards made over the years, I mean, right now, this is a pretty good format. I cannot complain when I see something like this. This is actually pretty amazing. The biggest stumbling block that this format has is price of entry. It's nowhere near Legacy or Vintage, obviously, and it is more expensive than, say, Frontier. However, there are some issues with pricing of some of these cards as far as getting into a deck and buying into it. And there's always the chance that you buy into a deck and then it falls out of the meta or something gets banned, and that's a huge risk, definitely, if you're spending a lot of money. The big obstacles, I think, for most people are mana bases. Of course, your enemy colored fetches, things like Horizon Canopy, stuff like that. The other big stumbling block are the great creatures like Tarmogoyf, even Dark Confidant, Noble Hierarch, those type of cards that are dependent to be part of a whole bunch of different decks in some cases. And then you have your one-off cards that are maybe only good in 1 or 2 types of decks, but your Damnations, your Crucible of Worlds, stuff like that, but they can be expensive. So that's hard to buy into at this point. If anything hurts Modern, it's not going to be the fact that it's not played at the World Magic Cup that one weekend. It's not going to be because it's not a Grand Prix trial at LGS in your town that particular weekend. It's going to be because nobody can afford to buy into it at some point, much like Legacy got to, right? I think that's where there's danger for the format. Can WotC reverse that? Well, they're not doing a great job right now. They're trying, and they're keeping things in check at some level with the Modern Masters and Eternal Masters releases. However, look at cards like Tarmogoyf. I mean, Tarmogoyf is still highly, highly played, and actually it has a bump up again in playability recently. Jund decks have come back, and you are seeing more Tarmogoyfs in the field again. So, right now, even though you're seeing a lot of them, and it was reprinted in the last 2 Modern Masters as Mythic, still over $100 for a copy of the card. And that's just too much, right? And it gets discouraging when you can't play the deck you want to play. Like, there are cheaper decks out there, but you want to play the deck you want to play, right? And if you can't, it's going to turn you off to the format. I think that's going to be an issue. Of course, enemy colored fetches are a huge issue. Hopefully they show up, hopefully in a standard release at some point, and you get a lot of copies, much like we saw with the allied color fetches. That helped a lot there. But that's the type of thing we need to do. WotC is in a weird spot. They're walking a line where they need to keep formats like that healthy to keep people engaged in their product overall, not just for Modern, but for standard releases as well. And if they don't do a good job at reprinting things fast enough and keeping prices in check, then you lose those players. On the flip side, though, LGSs are hurt if they overprint, because overprinting and these boxes becoming worthless, which we'll talk about a little more in a moment, is really bad for your local game stores because they have a harder time making a profit and staying in business. I think that's a good segue to talk about Modern Masters 2017. All right, so what is the deal with this set? I don't know how many of you have looked at prices, and there are some YouTubers who have talked about this. I would recommend Alpha Investments. Rudy did a great video talking about Eternal Masters, what happened with that set, and how it's burned people, and what's happening now with Modern Masters 2017. So definitely check out some of his stuff. He brings up some awesome points, and I agree with him. I mean, Modern Masters 2017 right now, I'm going to show you something real quick. I noticed this when I was trying to create a link for my Amazon affiliate store. All right, quickly, here's the Amazon affiliate store I always talk about. But notice, Modern Masters 2017 booster box, $180. That actually includes shipping. That's crazy. Okay. Just for a quick note, if you're new to Magic and you haven't seen these sets come out before, I spent about $300 or $310 on a box of the first Modern Masters. That's before I had the channel, and I just wanted to play it to draft with. The second Modern Masters, I bought a couple boxes for the channel, and I think I paid about $290 for those in pre-order in both cases. And then last year, I bought a couple boxes of Eternal Masters to open on the channel and play with, and I got those for about $300. I paid way too much in all three of those examples. Don't do that. But this time around, I did pre-order one of these to open on the channel, $180. That is well below retail price. Retail price is about $240 for this particular set. That's what they all were, except for the first Modern Masters. That one was cheaper. But the retail for all three of the more recent ones, $240 approximately. So this is well below retail price. This used to be basically free cash, like printing money for LGSs. It's not that way anymore because of what happened with the print run and what happened specifically with Eternal Masters. Now, to give you a quick idea, without taking too much time, first Modern Masters had a limited print run. Modern Masters 2 had a slightly larger print run, and you did see that. It was a little bit easier to get your hands on boxes for a long time afterwards for at or under retail price, quite honestly, because there was a lot more out there than was expected, because folks were expecting the same amount that we saw in the first Modern Masters. We got more of them. Eternal Masters came out. There's a lot of excitement around that set. It was the first of its kind. Boxes were going for about $300. They stuck around that $300 price point, give or take, for a while. But where things got crazy was last December. Wizards came out and they said, hey, you know what? We got some more of these Eternal Masters boxes. How many you want? And all of a sudden, the market got flooded with them. And prices dipped down to about where these prices are. They went down to like $180, $190, sometimes even cheaper, to pick up booster boxes of Eternal Masters. All the folks that bought large quantities to keep sealed and maybe try to resell in the future got burned real bad. They were in a situation where they had all this product they were sitting on that was now not worth anything. So is that what Wizards wanted to do? Did Wizards do that on purpose with Eternal Masters to really, not a better word for it, but burn people that are sitting on product and keeping them out of players' hands? Perhaps they did. Perhaps that was the theory. I mean, they did make a note in saying when they released their Eternal Masters, their second wave of it, they made a note of saying, we encourage you to play with these, to have drafts at your LGSs, stuff like that, and not just keep them in a closet. They did say that in their message. So it had to be somewhere in their mind. So is that good or is that bad? I guess it depends on who you are. It's bad if you bought 100 boxes of Eternal Masters expecting them to be worth $400 in 6 months and you can sell them and get a lot of money out of them. It's bad if you're a player and you just want to play with the cards. You want to pick up singles maybe for a deck, or you just simply want to play sealed with it, right? Then that's not a good situation for you to be in if you can't get a hold of them at a reasonable price. Now, the answer I think is somewhere in the middle, because it is important to have people that hang on to product and try to resell it in a later date and try to make profit, because again, many LGSs do that, and maybe not to a degree that some huge sellers do that you find sometimes on eBay or even Amazon or stuff like that. But if your LGS is really relying on this type of product to stay afloat, it could be a problem for them, right? In past years, we know that the Eternal Masters, Modern Masters, as well as some of these anthologies and from the vaults, it's kind of like printing money for these stores. I mean, they get this limited product. They're able to pay under retail for it and sell it for way above retail. In many cases, it probably keeps some stores in business. Well, all of a sudden, that's kind of going away. We saw that with Eternal Masters. We saw that also with anthologies, right? And even the last From the Vault. I mean, these products aren't garnering the price they used to garner for a number of different reasons. Higher print runs, lower demands in some cases. The product's just not as exciting as some of the past products. All different reasons for that, but the stores are kind of paying a price for it. And if stores go out of business, then that's bad for all of us. Bad for the players. We don't have a place to buy our Magic or play our Magic. It's bad for WotC. There's not stores buying their products and distributing it for them. So you don't want to go too far with that. You do have to be kind of careful. But at the same time, you can't create a situation where players can't afford your product either. And it turns out it's just going to hands of big resellers, big distributors, and it's just getting passed around as sealed product forever. That's really bad for the players. That's why people get out of Magic. That's why people can't play the formats they want to play. And eventually that hits Wizards' bottom line because they can't keep their player base. Typically businesses, WotC included, I've been watching them over the last few years, they make decisions that tend to be good decisions for short-term profit, but poor for long-term growth. Because unfortunately, the way business works, the drive to make immediate profits and make your stockholders happy is what really pushes these businesses forward and propels them. Sadly, sometimes it leads to their undoing in the long term. And I have noticed Wizards have made a lot of decisions like that recently. I feel like they've made short-term cash grabs to compromise long-term growth. This decision is the first one I would say they're thinking about their long-term health a little more than their short-term money, because they probably will lose some money going forward. There will be some stores that might not be able to stay in business because they don't have these products. There will be less of the big sellers investing in them now than we saw before. And that's why you can get these boxes for $180, because you don't have big sellers picking up hundreds and hundreds of copies of this anymore because they got burned with Eternal Masters. They're not doing that anymore. It's not driving the demand up based off the supply like it did before. So we're getting it cheaper. Players are getting it cheaper. Now, the good news is if players can get it cheaper, it might mean more players are going to invest in it, and you might start to even out at some point. And I think that's what Wizards is banking on. And I hope it works out. And I hope it works out for the LGSs too, because it's just, the money's still there. People are buying it. It's just different people are buying it. You're selling it to a wider percentage of your base as opposed to increasing the price but selling it to a smaller percentage of your base. So I don't know. I think a lot of it too is going to depend on when we see these cards spoiled. Yesterday was not a good start for them. I'm not really sure why the marketing department did what they did. I don't think it was handled very well when it comes to building excitement for the set. Yeah, there's conspiracy theories out there that they don't want the set to be exciting. They don't want to oversell it because it's a limited product. Or I've even heard people want it to fail because they don't want to support Modern anymore and want an excuse. I don't think that's true. No business is going to want their product to fail, trust me. Basically, I think Wizards does think they're selling these things no matter what, which is pretty much the case regardless. But I do find it weird that they didn't hit us with a couple of the big cards first and before showing us the package. I think that was a misstep. I think the packaging showing us 3 cards that were okay. Well, one was okay. The other 2, at least financially speaking, were very low. I mean, $7 card and $2 card. That was a little bit of a bad start, I think, to the hype machine that we'll see over the next couple weeks. Having said that, yeah, what they did with Eternal Masters was brilliant. I mean, they came right out of the box showing us Wasteland and Force of Will. They let us think about that for a while. And then about a week or 2 before the release, they started showing us other things. But if you remember, the hype around Eternal Masters was basically just those 2 cards until about a week before, or 2 weeks before it was released. And that's a little unusual. It was a shorter window compared to most sets. These spoilers officially start next Monday, so we are going to have 2 full weeks of spoilers like you would with most standard sets. So I do think they are putting actually more hype into this than they have even for Eternal Masters. But at the same time, they did not start off very well, and they do have to recover from that. I have confidence. I think it's still going to be a high value set. I think it's going to be a really great set. And I think we're going to get better uncommons and better commons this time around too, because that was one of the big complaints from 2015. So I think they're going to remedy that. I think we're going to see some really good things. It's just they didn't show us those good things on day one, and that hurt them a little bit, I think. Now, that's not the reason you can pick these things up for $180. Quite honestly, prior to that happening, you could still pick these things up for $180. So this kind of is what it is right now. I do expect there to be growth, maybe some growth even pre-release if they show us some cool stuff, right? Maybe new art on some really awesome cards, things of that nature. All right. Well, that's my thoughts right now, at least on Modern, the format. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Quickly, I wanted to go through what cards are hot and cold in Modern this week now that we've had to digest the whole weekend and the Modern GPs, excuse me. All right, let's talk about the top 5 Modern cards that lost value this week. Coming in at number 5 is Ravnica Doubling Season, down $1.75 to $59.99. If you've been following the market watches in this card, you kind of know. This saw a huge spike this winter with the really new focus on Commander, at least maybe some new players entering the world of Commander with the great Commander 2016 products. And this was perfect for the Breed Lethality deck. So a lot of people wanted to pick this up in the secondary market. It spiked really hard. It's stabilizing right now, so I do expect it to come down maybe a little more, but it's still going to hold its value. I would say this is still, regardless of everything that happens, a $50 to $60 card. It might see a reprint in Modern Masters that might help its value at least temporarily go down, but it will definitely creep back up again. Coming at number 4, Jace Vryn's Prodigy, down $1.83 to $35.04. Now, this card had a huge spike a few weeks back when the Frontier fever kind of hit. Like, everyone was talking about Frontier for like that 1 month, right? And was just focused on, and I think it was just simply because it was something new to talk about. It came out of Japan. It was interesting. It was a little controversial. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it. But with all the attention it was getting, this card went up quite fast. And now it's stabilizing back down a little bit, as you could expect. I think this card really is more of a $25, $30 card. I think that's a fair price for it, and I think we'll settle into that price. Retract, down $2.48 to $11.64. Okay, so a few moments ago I put up that list of decks that were in the top 16. Notice what you did not see on the list. Pure Steel Paladin, right? So that deck didn't have a good showing this weekend. It really needed one. Like, a lot of folks are trying to make that deck work. It could still get there. I mean, there's still different brews of it coming out all the time. But at least for right now, it's not really having a great showing. Because of that, Retract's already starting to retract in price. Coming in at number 2, Bloom Tender, down $3.85 to $29.99. This one I talked about this weekend in the regular market watch, so I don't want to go into too much detail. First off, I will mention Eventide Rares. They have the ability to gain value quickly and hold value if anyone is out there looking for them. This particular one did spike, however, because of a Saffron Olive brew, which I talked a lot about him last weekend, but he does a great job with his brews, and his brews have a definite impact on the market. And we saw that with this card. It's coming down a little bit because now it's basically a Commander card, quite honestly. So if you're not into Commander, you're probably not looking for this card. It's going to start to contract a little bit now, but it is an Eventide rare, so it's only going to fall so far. But I could see this being a $20 card probably. All right, coming in at number 1, Chalice of the Void from Mirrodin. Now, leading into this GP weekend, a lot of folks wanted to have copies of this on hand just in case the Pure Steel Paladin deck did well, because this card wrecks that deck out of the sideboard. It's still a great sideboard card, and sees playing not only in Modern, but also Legacy and Vintage, although it is restricted in Vintage. But it is a fantastic card. However, it had a huge spike recently due to the fear of that deck, and now it's starting to creep back down again. So this is not to be unexpected. I mean, this card was up to around $70 just about a week and a half ago or so, which is insane to think about that. But it's coming back down to probably where it belongs. It's still a great card, still sees a lot of play. I don't see it falling below 50 or 55, quite honestly, but I do think it's going to retract a little bit now. All right, let's move on to the cards that gained value this week in Modern. Coming in at number 5, probably no surprise, Mishra's Bauble, up $2.17 to $20.92. This is a key component in the Death Shadow deck, which you notice there were 3 copies on that list we looked at earlier. However, On top of that, they also got a ton of camera time. There's a lot of high-profile players playing them this weekend. Josh Utter-Layton won GP Vancouver, as a matter of fact, with that deck. So it got a lot of attention. So you can expect cards from that deck to be doing really well this week. This is an example of that. This card sees playing other decks too, but mainly it's spiking because of its inclusion in that deck. Another thing to point out, this is an uncommon that's now over $20. That's a little crazy. This really needs a reprint. Hopefully it shows up in Modern Masters 2017 as an uncommon. That would really mess the value of this card up real quick. But I think it needs it. This is a little bit ridiculous at this point. Even if that doesn't happen, this will snap back a little bit because it's spiking this week. Coming in number 4, Noxious Revival, up $2.20 to $4. This is in a lot of the Vengeance decks, and actually a pretty nice percentage increase this week, going up to $4. Coming in number 3, Mox Opal. This saw a spike, of course, with the attention on Pure Steel Paladin. However, this is also a key component to Affinity, which did really well this weekend too. So the combination of those two things have really pushed this card recently. Now, this is a wild card in some ways because, number one, now that we're seeing Pure Steel Paladin not doing as well, this could come down or at least stabilize a little bit. But with Affinity doing well, that might just cancel that out completely. Who knows? Secondly, Modern Masters 2017, this seems like a good candidate to see play again. Although, the question being, will Metalcraft hold it back? It just depends on how firm of an artifact theme they want in that limited set. But regardless, whether they have a lot of artifacts or not, I hope they do reprint this. I think it really could use it. Scars of Mirrodin version up $2.95 this week to $57, with the Modern Masters 2015 version going up $4.21 to $55.39. Coming in at number 2, Death's Shadow, of course, up $6.64 to $14.24 for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. This is a pretty nice spike for this card. It will start to go back down again, probably shortly after the hype surpasses. However, I think it was a little undervalued before, so I don't think it's going to go down probably nearly as close to as low as it was. I could see this stabilizing around a $10, $12 card, though. Coming in at number 1, Basilisk Collar, up $13.63 to $23.44. Typically, when you see a spike like this, you say buy out, but I don't think that's what's going on here, believe it or not. This is a key card in the Eldrazi Tron deck in Modern. It started to dry up a little bit on the marketplace. Some folks probably panicked and wanted to pick them up when they could, and all of a sudden, you have yourself a card that has basically almost doubled in price overnight in some ways. This is a card that combos fantastic with a couple of the other cards, of course, in that deck, which include Endbringer, give this Death Touch, start pinging things, seems pretty good, as well as Walking Ballista, one of the newer cards that has brought the prospects of this card up a little bit. So all those things considered, yeah, I do think this is a natural spike actually, but it is a really hard spike, so do expect it to snap back. This probably isn't the week you want to pick this card up unless you really need it for your deck this weekend or something. It will come back down a little bit for sure. All right, having said that, those are the cards from Modern, and let me know in the comments below your thoughts on all this stuff. Do you think Modern is healthy right now? Is it unhealthy? What do you think about Wizards support? And as far as it's showing at places like the Pro Tour or the World Magic Cup or even at local game stores, is that good? Is it bad? Do you play Modern? Do you not play Modern? If not, why not? That type of stuff. Love to hear all those thoughts. Helps me really get a tempo of what's going on in other regions, because Magic can be very regional. I know what's going on around me or where my friends live in different places, but I might not necessarily know what's happening worldwide. So it's always nice to hear comments about what's happening locally for you. So having said that, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.